Unafraid Show, Reister or Wrong. It's your boy, George Reister, in the building. Thank you guys for joining me today. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your energy. And as always, thank you for watching the Unafraid Show, and visit unafraidshow.com. We got a lot of great articles up for you. One of them that's up today is specifically about Derrick Henry and Marshawn Lynch, who had the better run. Dan breaks it down in a big way, and it's actually pretty cool, and you get to vote. One of the things I want to talk about today, the Pac-12 football schedule. It is an absolute mess. It is a disaster. And the conference just does nothing to help its teams go undefeated and figure out a way to get in the college football playoff. And I cannot figure out why it's not more important to the people at the Pac-12, to Larry Scott and everybody there. We're also going to talk about Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart got booted out of the Oscars over old tweets. Now, we've seen this with Dante DiVincenzo, who just won the national championship at Villanova. We've seen it with the baseball player as well, and they were able to continue at their job. So I find this very curious and very interesting. And also, there's an amazing Ohio dad. I want to know what you guys think about it. I posted it on Twitter, posted it on Facebook, and everywhere else. There's an Ohio dad who made his daughter walk 5 miles to school after she got kicked off the bus for the second time for bullying other students. And I want to know if you guys think that that is great parenting or not. You guys, as always, send in your comments, questions. I will get to them before I get off. And also, anything that I miss, send an email to immad@unafraidshow.com. IMMAD@unafraidshow.com. But here is where we're going to start today, is with the Pac-12 football schedules. Like, I am consistently, am calling the Pac-12 to do better. Commissioner Larry Scott and everybody else. So if anybody does not know, let me tell you how the Pac-12 specifically makes its schedule. They outsource their schedule. They send it to a third party who then makes the football schedule, and then they send it back for approval with all the athletic directors, and then they vote on it to see if the schedule is cool. Okay, doesn't sound like a bad idea until you realize how other conferences schedule their games, how they figure in their bye weeks and everything else. Everything is tailored and crafted to help the conference be successful. And that's not what the Pac-12 is doing by any stretch of the imagination. So the Pac-12 is going to have to take it on the chin and do something different, because what they're doing right now is not working. We'll start with the schedules that aren't terrible. The schedules that are not terrible. The first one that we're going to look at is Oregon State. Oregon State schedule, not horrendous at all. Because, so while they start out with Oklahoma State, then at Hawaii, which is actually a cool game. Then they play Cal Poly. Then they have a bye week, which is not bad, early in the season. But then they go through Stanford, UCLA, Utah, at Cal. And then they have another bye week, and then they finish out their schedule. That's not bad at all. There's also Washington State. Washington State schedule, not terrible either. So we're going to get out the ones that are not bad. Washington State schedule is not bad. Their bye weeks are balanced, and before they play a big tough stretch of games, they have bye weeks, which is what the SEC does. Now imagine a world where Alabama plays LSU and didn't come off of a bye week, which is one of their biggest rivals, but besides the Iron Bowl. Then they get another bye week before the Iron Bowl too. So their biggest rivalry games, they have a bye week. Yes, their bye week is a November cupcake. This year they played Citadel. But still, like, you have an opportunity to rest and get an extra week of game planning in. And the Pac-12 does not do that. Washington State, very balanced schedule. good bye weeks before they play tough stretches of games. Good job. So, and Washington State is not considered one of the elite teams in the Pac-12 when you talk about notoriety, when you talk about history, when you talk about any of these things. So, the teams that should be set up for success even more because you want to get a team in the college football playoff, they would be Stanford, Oregon, Washington, and USC, and then UCLA once they're good. Like, those are the teams that you should be trying to set up to make sure that you don't give them a bad set of circumstances. Like, let's consider this. 2 years ago, when USC played, I believe, Washington in the Pac-12 championship, USC was coming off of a bye week, and Washington just had to play Washington State. I'm sorry, it was Stanford. Yes. So, like, how does that make sense? How does that make sense that one team before a conference championship game gets a bye week and the other team plays the week before? Consider this year, Utah and Washington. Utah played the Holy War against BYU, a night game on Saturday night, a Pac-12 after dark game. Didn't end till damn near midnight. And then they got to turn around and play on Friday for all the marbles and a trip to the Rose Bowl. Now, would the SEC, with the Big Ten, with the Big 12 do that? No, they would not. They would not do that at all because they want to help ensure their teams get into the college football playoffs. So now I'm going to get into the bad schedules that are going on in the Pac-12. I'm going to start with Washington. I'm going to start with Washington because Washington is one of the top teams in the Pac-12 and a team that the conference in general should be concerned about how they do. They should, because this is a team that's going to come back as a top 10 football team. This is a team that is going to potentially win a national championship, like one of the better teams in the Pac-12. So we'll get started with their schedule. They play Eastern Washington, then they play Cal, then they play Hawaii at BYU, USC at Stanford, at Arizona, and Oregon, all before their bye week. So you have the team that gets usually has the top recruiting classes in the Pac-12 for decades, if you average it out. USC, one of the most talented teams in the country. Not always playing the best, but they're one of the most talented teams in the country. You got USC at Stanford against their biggest rival, who is Oregon, Cal, and BYU, all before you get a bye week. What? Like, who on earth thought that this could possibly make sense? Who on earth? Because now you have put your teams in a situation where, you would think that you would want Washington to play USC, Stanford, or Oregon late in the season. You would think so, because these are games that are going to be nationally televised. These are games that are going to determine how the committee sees you and public perception, which the committee 100% responds to. Then after the Oregon game, they have Utah and then at Oregon State. Then they have another bye week before Colorado and then Washington State on another Friday. I mean, who thought this was a good idea? Who thought this was a good idea to have Washington playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 consecutive tough games? And then you add in the Cal game after the Hawaii game. So 6 out of 7 extremely competitive games against teams that could be in the national conversation for the playoff. Yeah, okay. Good job. Good job. So Washington, they have to run the gauntlet, which they won't be able to do. So Washington will be out of the college football playoff conversation for next season. Okay, let's move on to Stanford. Another team that was in that mark. Okay. All right. Stanford usually schedules really good teams. They don't tank their schedule. This is by far one of the worst schedule setups I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, it is an amazing schedule, but it's terribly set up. I challenge anybody listening to this, watching this, whatever, to find a team who schedules football games like Stanford scheduled this year. Let me give it to you. Stanford is playing. They open up with Northwestern. Then they play at USC, at UCF, who hasn't lost a game in 2 years, and beat Auburn, Oregon, at Oregon State, and Washington, all in the first 6 weeks of the season. What? They should be the number one team in the nation if they start out 6-0. Then they have a bye week, and then play UCLA, Arizona, UCLA, Arizona, have another bye week. Then play Colorado, Washington State, Cal, and then Notre Dame. There are no FCS teams on this schedule. There's all Power 5 teams and UCF. Now go figure. Now you find me Auburn, Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, anybody, Ohio State, Michigan, anybody that would dare schedule a schedule like Stanford did. Yeah. So will Stanford make it out of there unscathed? Nope. No, they won't. No, they won't. It's just too difficult. And then, and the reason why I say it's too difficult, because great teams do win games, but it makes it difficult to fade injuries when you don't have bye weeks before big games. Because when you play physical game like you're going to have to play against Northwestern, then come back and play against USC, then play UCF, then play a physical game against Oregon, beat Oregon State, and then play another physical game against Washington. Your guys are going to get beat up, even if it's the beginning of the season. I mean, really think about this, and this is Stanford's football schedule. How does this make sense, Pac-12? How does it make sense? Like, you're setting your teams up to have multiple losses. And then say, well, our conference is so competitive. That's what we love. That's the way we want it. You're losing ground. People think you are the Pac-12 is the worst of the Power 5 conferences. They call it weak. They call it soft. It's because of the setup. That is part of the problem. The setup is part of the problem. Another schedule. Look at UCLA's schedule. They've got a tough stretch up front, but it's not entirely bad. Like, their schedule is not bad like Stanford's is bad. Because they start out at Cincinnati, which clearly ended up being a good team this year. San Diego State's always tough. Then they play Oklahoma at home, at Washington State, at Arizona, and Oregon State. So after the Oklahoma game, yes, they get a little reprieve. They go down a little bit with Washington State in terms of talent, but Washington State is always a tough team. Then they play at Arizona and Oregon State. That's not a bad way to set up. Then they go into their bye week. Then they play Stanford, Arizona State, and Colorado. Then another bye week. This is not a bad schedule because their bye weeks come. They give them a chance to rest up during conference play after a tough stretch in the beginning. Then they go at Utah, at USC, and then Cal to finish up. I mean, like the Pac-12, this is the way your schedule should look. It should not look like, I mean, no other conference would schedule their games like this. Like, imagine if Nick Saban had to play Stanford's schedule and play 11 Power 5 teams plus UCF. Let me know how that'll work out for him. Yeah, Bama would have a tough time going undefeated too. Utah schedule, like their schedule set up as well. BYU, Northern Illinois, Idaho State, at USC, Washington State, then a bye week. Then they play Oregon State, Arizona State, Cal, and at Washington. Then another bye week, UCLA, Arizona, Colorado. This is not terrible. This is not terrible at all. And Utah's not a premier team. So my question is, why are they setting the premier teams up in the Pac-12 for failure? I mean, you tell me if you have an answer to that question. Why they're setting them up for failure. And then you got USC's schedule, which it's great for you. Well, actually, it's terrible for USC too, because they have 2 bye weeks. One of them doesn't even occur during the season. They have already played all 12 games when they get their second bye week. Come on, man. Make that make sense to me. Make that make sense to me. You need the bye week during the season. USC is a team that was hurt so bad this year. They've been hurt in years past. You need your bye weeks during the season. And then if they do well and end up in the Pac-12 championship, they get a week off, which is a disadvantage to the other team who have been playing. Oh, Lord. I mean, listen, I don't claim to be the smartest man in the world, but I try to use logic and I try to make sense. Like you don't even have to think outside the box. You just look at the schedules and you're like, ooh, this is nasty. This is tough. This is not an easy road to hoe right here for people. And the conference should want, especially its marquee blue blood names, to do well, and the people who are on the rise. But the Pac-12 is so interested in competition and parity that it puts its teams in a disadvantageous situation and causes them to lose games and get knocked off in ways that they should not, which hurt them in the college football playoff. I mean, is anybody picking up what I'm putting down right now? Because I would hope so. We got Cal. Cal's schedule. Actually, before we go there, I'm going to go to Oregon's schedule. Oregon's football schedule for 2019. A neutral site game in Texas against Auburn, which is everybody knows is not neutral site. Can we get a neutral site game in the Rose Bowl, please? Please? That'd be nice. Auburn. You got Nevada, Montana, then at Stanford. Bye week. Cool. Not mad at that at all. Then you get Cal, Colorado, at Washington, Washington State, and at USC before you get a bye week. You can't play at Washington, then play Washington State, and then play at USC in 3 consecutive weeks without a bye week, when one of them is a huge rival and is guaranteed to be a slobber knocker game. Jeez, and then you have a bye week before you play Arizona State, and Oregon State. I mean, come on. Like, we could have put the bye week in between the Washington State and USC game, but actually it should have been before the Washington game. Give your teams a chance to rest up before the big rivalry games. The pomp and circumstance surrounding the game will go up, because when teams lose, because if you notice, one of the greatest assets of the SEC and of the ACC at times, when they only play 8 conference games, one of their greatest assets is not losing. And you don't lose if you don't play. And you don't lose if you play an FCS team or a team from the Sisters of the Poor. If you play a cupcake, you don't lose. And what does that do? You artificially go up in the rankings just because you didn't lose. And then all of a sudden, the matchup between Oregon and Washington and Washington State, whoever, is then magnified and elevated. Come on in. Then that's what makes your strength of schedule look tougher. I'm trying to hip you guys to the game, to the schedule manipulation. because this is what the wool has been pulled over everybody's eyes. And the other conferences, since the SEC won't change, you have to adapt to make yourself more competitive and to be able to survive in the landscape. Like if you are a business and you are in a dying industry, well, you're in a thriving industry, but your model is dead. It's not working. I mean, that's like somebody who doesn't accept credit card processing and they only take cash. Well, if you're not an established business, like you can't do that. Like if you're on top, if you're number one, you can do that. If you're Tito's Taco, you can do that. But you cannot do that if you are a team that's scratching claw and trying to get up. You can't be trying to use the old school swipe machine. You got to have it, make it convenient for people to pay. And that's not what the Pac-12 is doing. Cal's schedule, not terrible, but kind of bootylicious too. I mean, like we won't even break down every single one, but it's just frustrating. And then when you look at the Pac-12's non-conference schedule, their non-conference schedule is great. Like when it gets put up against other conferences, it's going to look extremely good because they have Auburn, Ole Miss, Notre Dame a couple times, Northwestern, UCF, BYU a couple times, Oklahoma, Michigan State, Texas Tech, Nebraska, and Oklahoma State, all on Pac-12 schedules. That's a good deal. And if the Pac-12 does well in their non-conference, they're going to set themselves up and put them in position to win games. I mean, well, to be in the playoffs. But then you're going to lose conference games because of the way the schedule is set up. Another terrible schedule, Arizona. They play at Hawaii on the 0 week. So that's not a problem. So they have a bye week early. And then they play Northern Arizona, Texas Tech. Then they have another week off before they get into conference play. So that sounds fine. But the problem is that the way that this is scheduled, set up, then they have to play their 9 conference games in a row with no bye week. And think about them this year. They had their quarterback get injured. Beginning of the year, sprained ankle, all of that. And then that pretty much kind of derailed the beginning of Arizona's season. That and their defense was so terrible. So how can you be upset about it? I mean, like, I just don't understand why you would continue to schedule like this when you see everybody else doing something completely different. Makes no sense to me. Now I want to, and here's what's laughable about the whole thing. So the Pac-12, like I said earlier, each team makes their own non-conference schedule. Then they send their schedules out to a third party who doesn't actually individually craft their schedules for success. They need to do that in-house like the SEC does. And then the ADs, the athletic directors, review the schedule and then they vote. And I love it how guys like Nick Saban, who's a respected head football coach, all of this, he says, I know nobody really wants this, but I've always been an advocate of playing all Power 5 schools. I think we need to have more really, really good games on TV for the players. We can't have fans who pay a lot of money for tickets and boxes and loges who support programs to pay for games that no one is interested in watching. So my question is, why don't you start the trend, Nick Saban? Why don't you start the trend? Because if you start the trend, guess what's going to happen? Everybody else is going to follow suit because they're going to have to. They're going to have no choice because you are the leader of the pack. Right? That would make sense. That would make sense to me. But everybody ain't always about what they say that they're about. Like everybody, they talk a good game, but then when it comes to the actual application of it, yeah, it's tough when you actually might thinking about stacking up some L's, because look at Alabama's future schedules. Because remember, Nick Saban is the one who said this. Their future schedules for 2020. Well, actually, so 2019, they're non-conference. Duke, New Mexico State, Southern Miss, and Western Carolina. 2020, USC, Georgia State, Kent State, UT Martin. 2021, Miami, Southern Miss, New Mexico State, and Mercer. 2022, Utah State, Texas, ULM. 2023, Central Michigan, Texas, Western Kentucky. Doesn't really look like you're making an effort, Nick. Doesn't really look like you're making an effort. I want to move on now to this dad. So I talked about it a little bit. There's this dad in Ohio who is, I call him a good dad. Some people are calling him an abuser. Some people are calling him all types of names. There's this dad in Ohio. You guys send in your comments. I will get to them, or shoot them in. I'm mad at unafraidshow.com. It's your boy, George Reister, in the building. So here is the problem. Here's this dad in Ohio. The dad in Ohio, I'm calling him a great dad. He had his 10-year-old daughter walk to school for 5 miles. Why did he do that, George? Well, his daughter was acting like a jerk. She, for the second time, not the first time, but the second time, got suspended off the school bus for 3 days for bullying somebody else. She got suspended for bullying somebody else for the second time on a school bus. And the dad posted the video and said, I want all the parents out there to know, teach your kids that all these things that they think mommy and daddy are supposed to do are a privilege, that they are not a right. Stop the entitledness. And I just wanted to give the man a high five. And there were so many people saying, oh my God, he shouldn't have to walk the whole 5 miles. I would have started it and wouldn't let her finish. And it was cold outside. And so what? You should have thought about that when your ass couldn't ride the bus because you were being a jerk. Should have thought about that then. Like, people have to be willing to, like, we have to be willing to give our kids consequences when they do bad things, and have them willing to live with what happens, because that's the way of the world. You do not, just like participation trophies are no good. The same thing is true for if you don't allow your kids to suffer consequences, because it's going to hurt their feelings. Yes, it's going to hurt their feelings, but it also increases their character and makes them understand that there are consequences. Because here's the thing is, you have to follow rules in life. You have to. Either by push or by choice. Either by force or by choice. You have to follow rules. Think about people in jail. They're in jail because they didn't want to follow the laws out here, Caesar's laws out here in the world. Then when they go to jail, what do they have to do? Follow rules extensively. People control when they eat, sleep, what they eat. They don't get control over their life. Really think about that. Everybody's got to follow rules, because if you don't, you got to pay. You got to either pay with your time or you got to pay with your cash. Sometimes you got to pay with both. You got to follow the rules, man. And I love this dad. But at the same time, I will say that if your kid gets in trouble, you do have to take stock and take inventory and say, hold up, is there anything that I did to potentially model this? Am I being a bully? Is there, like, where is this behavior, like, stemming from? Is my child being bullied and then responded by trying to be a bully? Like, you have to figure out what the actual cause is, because kids don't just naturally hate or try to do evil or bad things. I don't believe so. I believe that it's an education issue, whether it's at home, whether it's other people doing it to him, whatever it is. But I'm not mad at the dad at all. But the biggest question is that some people were asking, should the dad have posted it on social media? That's a tough question for me because I'm a person who believes in escalating consequences. So if his daughter got in trouble the first time for bullying on the school bus, okay, he had some consequence for her. That clearly didn't work because she did it again. And then if you're a parent and you go up there and you see your kid is bullying, what are you going to say? Hold up. If you're a good parent, you're going to say, hold up. Don't worry, school. I will get this done and I will make sure that everybody knows that this will not happen again. So maybe you do post it because it's an escalating consequence. But did the embarrassment need to be necessary for the kid is the question. Because the dad didn't mean to make it viral, get posted in articles, but you never know these days. I don't think I would have initially posted it, but this is probably the umpteenth time that they've had this conversation. And he wants to make sure that it's getting stopped. And maybe he wants to demonstrate to people out in the world that, okay, I'm doing something about this. To the other teachers, parents, and people involved in the situation. I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. Like, I know that there are participation trophy parents that hate it. But why on earth would you hate this? Why on earth would you hate somebody doing something to fix a bad situation? Because I'm not a person, like if you want to give trophies out to everybody in a league and make kids soft and make them entitled, think that everybody wins and gets equal things no matter your effort or accomplishment, I'm not with that. But I am with giving all the kids trophies. I am 100%. In youth sports, I'm all in on giving like all the way up to like 8 maybe. Give all the kids trophies. But the winners need to get bigger trophies, better trophies, and acknowledgement out in the world for doing great things. I'm 100% in on that. You can give everybody a trophy long as the winners get bigger, badder trophies. I'm in on that. The last thing we're going to talk about today is Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart dominated the news, not just because he's Kevin Hart and he didn't have an affair or a sex tape come out this time. This time, Kevin Hart got in a little bit of trouble because of old tweets. Now, I have a question for you. So if I tweeted something 9 years ago, because I have not gone through my entire timeline, but if I tweeted something 9 years ago that is offensive, yes, I can apologize for that, which Kevin Hart has done. In the past, he had addressed those tweets and all that. So for the Oscars and the LBG community and everybody else to demand more apologies is crazy to me. Like, how many times must you apologize for the same thing and address it? Because I'm not a person who deletes tweets. The only time I delete a tweet is if I post it and I immediately see something wrong with it. I will delete it and post it right back with the spelling correction or whatever. But if I say something, if I make a prediction or something, I'm not changing it. I don't delete tweets. But I also don't say jerk stuff on Twitter either. So that's the thing, is that how much of this people should be held accountable for this. Because if things that I thought and believed 9 years ago, I do not think and believe now. There are things in my life that have changed. Married, got 4 kids, 1 on the way. Transitioned from being an NFL player to having a second career. Like, my perspective on a lot of things in life has changed. So to think that somebody's life is not going to change is short-sighted. I mean, that's like, well, George, how about if somebody was tweeting the N-word and all that stuff years ago? Oh, like Dante DiVincenzo from Villanova? Yes, there is people who change. Just because he thought that or said that or thought that was cool to do at 15 or 14 does not mean that he thinks that it's cool at 22, 21, 22. That does not mean he thinks the same thing. And I'll give you a prime example. I've talked about it a few times. I had a guy that I played with in college, came from a skinhead neighborhood. When we were our third year there, he says to me, "Hey, yo, George, it was crazy because I've come to school and I've realized that there are two types of people, good people and bad people. Because I was told that all black people were bad, other people were inferior, that we were innately better than them, that the white man was innately better than these people, that they were savages and all of this stuff, and our good Aryan blood was the most important thing to us." But then he came to come find out, hold up, everybody of this background is not cool. And I found out that there are some great people of other backgrounds. So then I gave him the test that you can see about somebody's heart and where they're at. I said, okay, cool. I'm happy that you feel that way. I'm proud to hear that you came to college and had some growth, because we all do on some level if you're open. And I said, okay, so would it be okay if one of the black guys that you think is a good guy married your daughter? And he gave me an honest answer, which I could appreciate. He said, honestly, George, I would be okay with it. But it would be hard with my family, with people that we grew up with, all of this. It would be hard. So for that, I would prefer that she married a white man. However, if he's a good dude and treats her right, that is all I care about. And I was like, that is a win. Somebody's heart and soul has been changed. That means that his kid's heart and soul will be changed. His wife likely won't have the same heart. That's how we kill racism. That's how we kill it right there. But I'm not a person who's going to hold something against somebody 9, 10 years ago, even if it was offensive to me, especially if I believe that they've changed or they've evolved. Because at this point in time, we have a war on comedy. Think about this. Comedy is part of our life. Comedy is funny, it's important, and a lot of times it's self-deprecating. You have Mexicans talking about Mexican heritage. You have gay people talking about gay issues. You have black people talking about black people issues. And sometimes you have people who have straddled multiple sides of the fence. And they are, like, in terms of their environment, the people that they've been around. Yes, and yes, some stereotypical jokes are funny. Like, at what point in time, like, can we just stop being so offensive? I mean, PETA the other day was talking about anti-animal language. Don't beat a dead horse. Feed a fed horse. Man, if y'all don't get out of here, that's not anti-animal language. Like, this is like, yes, you cannot use words like referring to a gay person as a FAG. You can't. Because it's not nice. Like, it's not cool. It's not cool at all. I mean, it's a derogatory term. You can make a joke without a derogatory term, but the joke is okay. Like, we have to be able to laugh at ourselves and have some enjoyment in life. It shouldn't come at the expense of others, but you can make fun and make light of situations. That's why I like Dave Chappelle so much. Like, his humor is smart. It's self-deprecating. It's real. He takes real issues and talks about them in a real way. Sometimes people are offended, but there's so much truth rooted in it that he's unwilling to change. And if I were him, I would not be willing to change either. The last point about Kevin Hart is this. So he wanted to host the Oscars. Of course, everybody does. I would love to host the Oscars. You would love to host the Oscars. The only problem that I saw with what Kevin Hart did is this. He initially said, I'm not going to apologize. Okay, that's cool. If you don't want to apologize because you've already addressed these things and you're going to stand your ground, okay, cool. No problem. But then for you to lose your gig hosting the Oscars, which is a big damn deal, and then still turn around and apologize, that's craziness to me. If you weren't going to apologize, like, just stick to your guns, whatever it is. But now you look like wishy-washy ass Paul Ryan right now. Somebody who's just not having the spine to stand up to what they said. Especially if you've already apologized, because you definitely should apologize when you offend people. But sometimes stuff, we take the offense too far, even as black people. Everything's not racist. Sometimes there are cultural differences, geographical differences that shape thoughts and ideas. But that doesn't mean they're racist. That just means they need to be reshaped because they were taught something wrong or assumed something. You guys are watching The Unafraid Show. George Reister here. I appreciate your time. Appreciate your energy. Visit unafraidshow.com. All types of great articles up. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. Make sure you tell a friend. Always share The Unafraid Show. That's the best thing that you can do. If you enjoy it, please share it. Peace out, guys. We'll catch you guys later.